They brought in every top engineer, every AI specialist, and still the Navy's most advanced ship stayed dead in the water. Until the retired black sailor showed up with nothing but a notebook, a wrench, and 30 years of gut instinct. "Sir, we've lost propulsion again." Lieutenant Neil Darby stood stiff in the control room of the USS Halcyon, his face drained of all color. The words he spoke hung in the air like smoke. No one moved. No one breathed. Captain Elise Brannan stepped forward, her boots clicking on the metal floor. "Define again, Lieutenant." Darby's voice dropped. "Main hybrid unit cycled down. Manual restart failed. She's not responding to backup protocols either." Silence. Then a low curse from the chief engineer, Bradley Tennyson, who'd been hunched over the diagnostics panel for the past 4 hours. He didn't look up. This was day 2 of what was supposed to be a 5-day classified training exercise 120 miles off the coast of San Diego. The Halcyon, a nearly $4.3 billion marvel of military engineering, was dead in the water. No forward motion, no power to weapons. Limited comms. One of the Navy's most advanced destroyers had turned into a 9-ton paperweight. The hybrid propulsion system was meant to be untouchable. Months of secrecy surrounded its installation, and only a handful of engineers had clearance to work on it. It combined electric turbines, gas propulsion, and an adaptive AI interface that monitored engine health in real time. But now, all that brilliance was useless. In the engine room, the tension was tighter than the steel walls. A group of 10 engineers, both Navy and civilian, hovered around diagnostics stations, sweating through their uniforms. Software updates had been pushed, circuit boards replaced. The AI reinitialized twice. Nothing worked. At 0400 hours, Captain Brannan made the call. "We're not making any more guesses," she said, pacing in the briefing room. "Someone outside this circle needs to look at this." Commander Raj Patel, head of the engineering division aboard, shook his head. "That won't sit well with command. They handpicked this team for a reason." Brannan met his eyes. "And yet this team hasn't fixed it." She knew how this looked. This ship was one of the Navy's crown jewels. If word got out that it had failed just weeks after deployment, heads would roll. Probably hers first. The higher-ups weren't thrilled, but they approved the request. A silent chain reaction of calls and emails spread up the command ladder. The Navy's top propulsion consultants were contacted. One after another, they reviewed the data and declined to intervene. Not enough intel. Too many unknowns. The risk to their reputations was too high. By the start of day 3, the morale of the crew was sinking fast. Food rations were fine, but patience was fraying. Petty Officer Lindsay Roy, usually the comic relief of the lower deck, barely spoke during her shift. A sense of failure began to wrap around the ship, like a fog. Admiral Clarence Pike received the update at precisely 08:15 hours. He sat in his office at Naval Base Point Loma, reading through the latest diagnostics and field reports. He'd been a hard-nosed commander for most of his 37-year career, the kind who spoke little and expected a lot. But even he knew when to admit that something wasn't adding up. "Get me Raymond Ellis," he said without looking up from the tablet. His assistant paused. "Sir? You heard me. I don't care where he is. Find him." There was a reason Ellis's name hadn't been brought up earlier. The man had been out of the game for nearly 8 years. He'd retired quietly, without ceremony, and hadn't touched a Navy engine since. But Pike remembered. He remembered a day in Bahrain when an entire power grid nearly collapsed, and Ellis, barely a senior enlisted at the time, rerouted an entire system using just a wrench and a sketchbook. He didn't need AI. He didn't need theory. The man listened to machines. Back on the Halcyon, Captain Brannan stood at the edge of the deck, staring out at a sea that no longer looked peaceful. Then her comm crackled. "Captain, Command has greenlit a consultant. Civilian status, coming in under emergency clearance. ETA 5 hours. She raised an eyebrow. "Name?" "Raymond Ellis." She turned and walked back inside without a word. But 5 hours on a ship that felt like it had given up was longer than anyone wanted to admit. The engines weren't the only thing that had shut down. By the time the third day hit its midpoint, the USS Halcyon felt more like a floating memory than a warship. The air carried the weight of quiet frustration, and no one needed to say it out loud. The ship wasn't just stuck, it was embarrassed. In the mess hall, conversations had dried up. Even the younger sailors, usually quick with sarcasm and jokes, were silent. They moved slower, ate less. Some avoided eye contact altogether. A few pretended they weren't worried. Most didn't bother pretending. Down in the engine room, the smell of burned rubber still lingered from the last emergency reset. The system had blown another fuse overnight, one of the last backup relays. Now the main console sat dark, the onboard AI looped in diagnostics purgatory, and the best anyone could offer was speculation. "We're missing something fundamental," Commander Raj Patel muttered, crouched next to the power grid access panel. "But I can't figure out what it is. Nothing in the data makes sense." Beside him, civilian contractor Hannah Ewan scrolled through code on her tablet, frowning. "We're looking at this through the lens of perfection. This system was designed in a lab, but ships don't live in labs." Patel leaned back against the wall and sighed. "I know. We need someone who understands chaos." That's when the call came through, an announcement over the internal comms. A civilian consultant was en route under high-priority clearance, arrival scheduled by chopper within the hour, all engine personnel to stand by. Most of the crew had no idea what that meant. Some assumed it was another MIT wunderkind with a fresh algorithm. Others joked that maybe the president was sending Elon Musk. Only Captain Brannan and a few senior staff knew the name, Raymond Ellis. He didn't look like anyone had expected when the Black Hawk touched down on the makeshift helipad on deck. The man who stepped off wore worn boots, a faded navy windbreaker, and a face full of creases carved from time, salt, and diesel fumes. His left hand held a notebook so beaten it looked like it had traveled with him through several wars. Around his neck dangled an ancient stethoscope, navy blue rubber dulled to a murky gray. Chief Tennyson squinted. "This the guy?" Ellis didn't bother responding. He glanced at the crew waiting to greet him and simply said, "Where's the engine room?" They walked in silence, save for the steady rhythm of boots and bulkheads. As they descended